welcome to the post-game edition of Access Vikings here from US Bank Stadium, where the Vikings just lost 28-22 to the Eagles. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues Ben Goessling and Andrew Krammer, and for points in this game, it kind of felt like neither team wanted to win. The second quarter was quite slow for the offenses. The Eagles came back. The Vikings came back a little bit in the second half, too. Both offenses felt more alive, but this was an interesting one. It was a bit of a doozy. Its high points didn't even feel that high. I guess, Ben, what was your kind of read on this game's tone overall?
Well, I think it's one they're going to probably be frustrated with because they had a 3rd and 15, a 3rd and 13, and a 3rd and 9 against a team they were trying to limit from getting in short yardage situations, because we know what the Eagles do when they're in short yardage situations. They tush push. So part of the game plan was keep them out of situations where they can run for first downs, and then Jalen Hurts in all three of those situations is able to extend plays, and at least a couple of those he extended the play. Certainly the 3rd and 9 at the end of the game, I think Isaiah Rodgers is sitting on a short route there, and then he hits A.J. Brown downfield for 45 yards. It effectively ends the game. The fact they couldn't, Hurts ended the day with a perfect passer rating, 158.3. The last time that happened was probably Jared Goff against the Vikings in 2018, if that's the Thursday night.
It might be, yeah. That's the last one I remember.
I think that's on your list of games to watch. I don't know that this one will be. We don't need to, but the quarterbacking performance of Jalen Hurts is part of the reason that the Vikings couldn't complete the comeback and get over the top in this one.
And he was making big pass plays in every quarter. The second half was when he broke it open, but the first half we saw A.J. Brown go 37 yards over Josh Metellus. I think that was on 4th and 4, wasn't it?
Yes, it was definitely a 4th down.
They finally get him to a 4th down, and they still give up. They just couldn't pressure Jalen Hurts. It seems like they could not affect him behind the pocket or bring him down.
Well, and that was the one where he really sat back there for a long time, and you see him point out and script exactly where he's going on that throw. Yes, the one where Metellus got beat in coverage. And, Josh took responsibility for that post game. He's like, obviously you want pressure there on Hurts, but ultimately it's my job to defend that guy, and he got past me. So A.J. Brown did that a couple times tonight, as we mentioned. One thing that was interesting, I thought, was the Eagles started early with Saquon pretty heavily in that first scripted drive, and then the Vikings defense did fairly well with limiting him throughout the rest of the game, I felt.
Yeah, I think the 4 drives after the touchdown drive at the beginning of the game, the Eagles had a net of 27 yards. So the Vikings basically forced, I think it was 3 3-and-outs, and then the series before the end of the first half where they just ran out of time after 4 plays and weren't close enough to really do much else. Yeah. But, the defense did a nice job of keeping them in the game, as they have done quite often. But too many big plays downfield today, and, a tough day for a number of people. One of them, Isaiah Rodgers, playing against his former team, got picked on in coverage a few times, and a couple of big plays were his way.
What I wanted to ask you about was the big pass plays, limiting the run. That was a situation where they came into this knowing that they wanted to stop the run and get him into 3rd and long situations, and they still couldn't do it. And so you mentioned Isaiah getting beat downfield the way that he did. Ben, you wrote this is the fastest guy on the team in some time, not even just this team, probably some years.
Yes.
And there were still moments he couldn't keep up with some of the downfield plays.
Yeah, I think he said afterwards on the 79-yard touchdown, he said his leverage was not good on that. He said, I basically didn't need to turn and look at it the way I did, just kind of keep going downfield. And I thought the one at the end where he gets beat by A.J. Brown, that was a 3rd and 9. A.J. Brown does a nice job there of the jab step inside, because Isaiah Rodgers is probably thinking, I have to defend against something at the sticks, especially when the Vikings, I think, brought 5 or 6 in pressure, and that move gives A.J. Brown enough clearance to get downfield. Rodgers closed on it somewhat, but was already beat by that point. So, it was a tough day for him. He got picked on, and the Eagles were not afraid to go after him. Obviously, with all that speed, we talked about it this week, certainly wrote about it today. 23-3 was the reading when he chased down DK Metcalf, tried to chase down DK Metcalf in Dublin. But the Eagles practiced against him the last year and certainly weren't afraid to challenge that speed downfield today, and especially on a couple of them where he didn't feel like his technique was great, they got the better of him.
There was a lot of talk on social media, too, of people noticing. I think Mina Kimes with ESPN had pointed out that the Eagles don't run a lot of under center play action, and suddenly they were doing that on the Vikings here. And I asked Metellus after the game about that. He had said, look, we can't use that as an excuse. Tons of teams are going to do different things than what they typically do beforehand with us. But, yeah, that was not something that we had seen necessarily from them. And it worked. The 79-yarder to Addison was a deep play action drop out of under center. Second half, they went back to that for a 19-yarder to not Addison, to Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison. They went back to that with Devonta Smith as well for a 20-yarder in the second half. So it just seemed like they found some scheme things that also happened to work against the Vikings.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat from True Media that the Eagles had not gained a yard on under center play action before today all season. So they gained a few today.
Yeah.
They did a pretty effective job with it today.
We'll talk about Jordan Addison and the Vikings offense in a moment. I think the last thing we need to talk about with this defense was their single tush push rep against the Eagles here, where they had quite the interesting strategy, which was putting Tyler Batty, who just returned from injured reserve, on the ground, having Jalen Redmond and Levi Drake Rodriguez basically leap over him or attempt to leap over him to stop it. All of them, talking to them in the locker room, sounded pretty confident in that strategy and said, we thought we did well against that. And obviously, they had to redo the down, or they had another attempt at it, and then it got penalized and stuff. So it didn't quite work out in the long run for either team. I don't know. You didn't get a good stance on it, but
it would have been interesting to be in the locker room or be in the meetings for that conversation. It's like, hey, Tyler, welcome back. Glad your knee's feeling better. So here's what we're thinking.
Well, Blake Cashman said it's because Tyler's, quote, a maniac is what I said. Yeah. How did Tyler land in that position? He said he's a maniac.
Eric Wilson nearby, too, goes, he's a certified maniac. And then and Blake mentioned, too, that they saw this on film with the Kansas City Chiefs. Right. He said we had noticed that the Chiefs had done this successfully.
In the Super Bowl?
Was it the Super Bowl? It must have been. Last time they played.
Probably the last time they saw him.
I suppose, yeah. And he said that was where we got the idea from. He said it feels like that might be something that teams are going to continue to copy because it seems like it worked. And Eric Wilson from the back went, it did. It worked. So they felt like they found at least a solution for it.
Apologies to the Tyler Batty equivalents in however many other markets will have to use that this year against the Eagles. But yeah, I mean, if you have it's Tyler Batty's not the only NFL football player who's willing to live on the edge a bit. Let's put it that way.
And he said he was feeling great. He said he feels 100% healthy, was ready to return pretty quickly into IR. He said a few weeks in, I knew that I was going to be ready once I came off that 4-week game requirement. So I don't think there was anything there to worry about with, was that a little too much pressure for your knee to take?
Yeah, and defensively, we should mention, too, Ivan Pace, he got benched in this game. He started the 5 previous games for the Vikings. It started, I think, 28 of the games he's played in 2.5 years. And when Cashman came back, they decided to go with Eric Wilson over Ivan Pace, who had missed 10 tackles in those first 5 games. So it seems like there were some repercussions there for Ivan's start to the year and them going with Eric Wilson. So Ivan said afterward, it was communicated to him during practices throughout the week that he wasn't going to get that role that he's used to, and that he said he hopes it's just kind of a week-to-week thing moving forward. But Blake Cashman had also mentioned that I told the young guys some stories from teams I've been on of guys who have been in similar situations and emerged, as Cashman said, as all pros in some instances. So he's hoping that Ivan keeps his head up.
Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson both had pretty big days, or at least had some big catches in this one. But TJ Hawkinson, and a catch that ended up being overruled, I think is the big storyline offensively coming out of this one. Ben, walk us through that moment, what we saw, and then obviously the ruling there.
Yeah, he puts a move on coverage, breaks outside. Carson Wentz kind of forces him to lay out. Wentz said afterwards he thought he could have thrown him a better ball. But as Hawkinson's laying out, makes the catch, called a touchdown on the field. He got his hand under it, it looked like at the time. And he said in the locker room that 2 officials told him, hey, we thought it was a catch. We had you catching it. But the review from New York shows the ball, I think, was moving. I mean, looked like maybe it touched the ground. So it gets overturned. Hawkinson was pretty fired up about it in the locker room after the game. Basically said, you can't have New York come in and come over the top of the officials when the officials had it that way on the field. I mean, that is how the process works, is that New York can do that. But I think his point is, if the people officiating the game are saying, we are in agreement, this is a touchdown, then the evidence has to be pretty conclusive. I guess New York felt like it was, but Hawkinson didn't like the fact that that went that way. And we are going to get a pool report from the officials a little bit later on, so we should have a little bit more information on what the officials saw when they reviewed it. I mean, what New York saw when they reviewed it from the league offices there. But yeah, big moment in the game, and then the Vikings decide after that to keep chasing the touchdown. They convert the 4th down, end up kicking the field goal, ended up probably blowing another, I think it was 50-some seconds off the clock, didn't have the 2-minute warning. I asked Kevin O'Connell about that after the game. He said, I did think about kicking on the 4th down, but it was 4th and 2, so short enough to try to convert it. They did, and then I think a sack on that next set of 4 downs hurts them as well in terms of the clock management. Ultimately, they kick it after the 2-minute warning. But, yeah, he said at that point you're still trying to chase the touchdown. And the fact that they got the conversion, I think they still felt like they could. And then, obviously, the sack kind of changes a lot of things there when they're trying to punch it in the end zone to make it a 3-point game or 2-point game, I guess it would have been. Because Will Reichert kicking the ball the way he had, hits a 59-yard early. They felt like if we need to, at the end of the game, you can send Will Reichert out there from quite a long way and feel pretty good about your chances.
That makes sense. I mean, 70 yards could maybe be his range. Who knows?
Inside, yeah.
We'll see someday, I'm sure.
On that call, though, with Hawkinson, Brian O'Neill said after the game, he said, I did not agree with that call either. Shocker that he didn't agree with it, but many Vikings players did not, surely, and he was one of them. And he said, especially with how the game was called earlier, and I followed up and I said, well, what did you mean? What other calls were you talking about? And he goes, I better stop talking.
Well, O'Connell said afterwards that there was the one touchdown early. I'm trying to remember which one it was. Must have been maybe Saquon Barkley. I'm trying to think.
Boy, I can't remember now.
There was a throw that O'Connell said looked very similar to that, and the calls he felt were inconsistent from one another.
Interesting.
I do remember them losing a challenge on a similar, was it a completion ruled that they thought was incomplete, and then obviously was upheld as complete.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson also noted with that Hawkinson catch that, I mean, it's kind of hard to do anything in that situation when you're on the receiving end. He's like, I believe he said that coaches sometimes try and get you to flip your body so that you're landing on your back and there's less discernment needed over whether the ball hit the ground or not, but also when you're as big as TJ Hawkinson is, I'm sure trying to rotate your body in midair is not a super easy task, even that being super athletic.
There are a lot of these things that we can sit here after the fact.
Yeah, just do that.
You should have done that with the benefit of slow motion replay that we can watch from 1,000 angles when most of us in the moment couldn't.
We're not saying that.
No.
We're not saying that.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson said that's one coaching point they're sometimes given.
Yeah. It's a lot of this stuff comes down to people trying to make incredibly complex movements and decisions. I think about this sometimes with some of the things defenders are asked to do to not land on a quarterback. I remember when the Anthony Barr, Aaron Rodgers rule started in this stadium, talking to Harrison Smith about that, and it's just, the way you have to contort yourself sometimes is, whether to fit within rules or whether to complete plays. It's the reason these guys are the best athletes in the world is they get asked to do some pretty crazy things, and sometimes it's in the spur of the moment that makes it pretty tough to do.
We should go big picture and talk quarterbacks. We should. Carson Wentz, what a roller coaster today. The guy throws 2 interceptions with that 3-throw stretch where it was pick 6, where he did have immediate pressure up the middle from it seemed like Blake Brandel's area. Pick 6, followed by the backward pass for a loss of 8, followed by the arm punt interception. Near Jordan Addison, and then he comes back in the third quarter and fourth quarter. Frankly, the whole second half was productive, moving the ball up until the red zone.
He was, and I think they did a lot of things later in the game where they were able to get into a rhythm. I thought as effectively as they've done it in a while. When we had all these offensive line changes and they've had all of these quarterback changes, really, but. It's going to be interesting to see how this week goes because he comes out of this when he got smoked on the, I think the pick 6, where he's laying on and he basically said after the game that I saw it initially and then I was laying on the grass because I got hit by Jalen Carter pretty hard on that play. It looked for a second like he was going to have to be attended to on the sideline. He stays in the game. But, trying to get turned around in 4 days. He said afterwards, it's why I'm not a big fan of the Thursday night games because it is really hard to do. So there's not much question he's, just ailing in a number of different ways right now.
Well, and he was a full participant for most of the week this week, but he did come off last week with that left shoulder soreness, even through the bye week from that hit he had suffered against the Browns.
Again today, didn't he?
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But Okay, so you wanted to go broad with the quarterback conversation. Then I guess, do we think anything that Carson did or didn't do today changes how they look at Thursday night?
Boy, I still would have to imagine this is all about J.J. McCarthy's practice time and where they feel he is at. I can't imagine what Carson does will change their plan for J.J.
No, I would think that, and we've kind of thought this short week would be difficult for McCarthy to come back, especially when you're probably going to get a Tuesday practice. Maybe it's a walkthrough almost, kind of a glorified walkthrough. There's not going to be a lot of full-speed practice reps between now and Thursday night. When you're facing another tough defense and a coach that knows J.J. McCarthy better than just about anybody else. So I would think it's still Wentz. We'll see how the week goes, but I would be a little surprised if this is the moment where they say, yeah, he's had enough practice time as they've talked about it, wanting to see him have. It doesn't feel to me like this is the moment yet.
And we should note that J.J. McCarthy's next full practice will be his first since he had the high ankle sprain. He was limited all last week.
Yeah, I think if you don't see that happen this week, if he's listed as limited whatever day they are out on the field, even if it's a walkthrough type thing, I wouldn't expect to see him.
We've mentioned in passing a little bit some of the O-line stuff. Obviously, the Vikings got back Donovan Jackson at left guard this week off his wrist surgery that he'd had a couple weeks ago. They got back Brian O'Neill, which we were a little unsure about pregame. Yeah. Andrew, I know you had talked to him in the locker room on Friday, but he did end up playing. And you talked to him postgame today. I guess, how was he feeling playing today?
Yeah, I talked to him and Darisaw. And with O'Neill, he had said he's doing well. He said Saturday was the day that he felt he was going to be able to go after seeing how his knee responded to the limited work on Friday. He said it gave out on him a couple times, which the severity of give out, I'm not exactly sure, but he was able to finish the game, wore the right knee brace. Reminder, he's coming off that MCL sprain he suffered in Dublin 2-3 weeks ago, I guess, at this point. The fact he was able to get through the game is a good sign, but they're going to have to see how he can turn over in 4 days on a short week. Darisaw, the same thing. He was able to play every snap. He said the bye week was great for that leg that obviously was still bothering him when he was limited and didn't play really in the fourth quarter in London. But he said he's going to have to see the recovery and how much. He doesn't anticipate restrictions, he said, but obviously things can change depending on how his knee responds.
Right, and the last time he played a full game was in Dublin, Christian Darisaw, that is, and then he spent most of the week in London not practicing or practicing only in a limited
He couldn't even practice till Friday.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know how much this plays into it, but it's worth bringing up, I think. Where he got hurt last year was in this exact scenario. A Thursday night game on that field after a tough game at home. So does that factor in? I don't know that it will. I have to imagine it'll be in his mind a little, but when you're turning over and trying to get yourself ready in that amount of time, you have to factor in all those things. I mean, these Thursday night games are not going away. They are popular for the league. They like the money they get from Amazon, which is a hefty sum of money to broadcast these particular games. So it's going to be part and parcel of the job. But in this particular case for the Vikings and their offensive line, it is a tough assignment when you are going through the week trying to get ready. The Chargers have to do it too, but the Vikings have to travel to the West Coast. They've had the Thursday night draw on the West Coast. Speaking of Jared Goff and a 158-3, that was a Thursday night in L.A. After, I think it was right after they lost to the Bills and the famous Josh Allen upset back in 2018. So, tough set of asks for players as they get through this week.
Josh Allen. That was when we hurdled a 6'5" Anthony Barr, and everyone was like, "Oh, this is not a normal quarterback."
This is a thing we do now.
Yeah, this is a thing that we do now. We should mention one offensive lineman we did not see in the locker room was Blake Brandel, the center who had a pretty rough day. Even if we don't talk about the holding call that Kevin O'Connell seemed to have questions about, that was the holding call he had questioned afterward,
yes,
right?
Yes, it was, yes.
We said it seemed like a pretty standard block or whatever, but even
trap block, he called it, basically swatting his hands down, and then the guy kind of went down. It looked, the guy going down, it looked a bit like soccer players may applaud some of those things.
Buddy Neil in London
By my eyes.
says the Millwall club does not applaud flopping.
Sorry, the football club.
They don't.
In addition, differently to the American football club, Neil. Yes, we know it's not soccer. Sorry, I'll try to do better next time.
But
football.
It was still a 22-yard loss on a snap over Carson Wentz's head. It was immediate pressure given up on the pick six. It was on the previous play before the pick six. He couldn't block Jordan Davis on a failed run. Blake had a tough go at center on this one.
Yeah. And, a guy that after the way he played in London, Wes Phillips talked about this is maybe his best position. Yeah. You're kind of thinking, okay, maybe they have something they can build with there. And we thought this week, his size against some of those linemen, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, for the Eagles could be a benefit. But, he had a tough day.
Yeah, Jalen Carter got a barrel down the middle at Carson Wentz more than once, more than that one time that he forced the interception there.
Swing moves were very effective.
This was Jordan Addison's home debut because he made his return or his start for the season after suspension abroad. A couple flashy plays. He was not in most of, he was in the game, but he didn't do a ton in those middle quarters, but had some strong moments in the first and the fourth. Justin Jefferson, too, had some high points, but then, late in the game, he has those few passes that Carson sends his way near the end zone. That one of them he did say he dropped. He felt like it was a drop. I guess, where do we look at this receiver room now that Jordan's back? I know one thing that we've talked about with both of them is that sometimes Jordan coming back draws attention away from Justin, and the other receivers and TJ Hawkinson do that too, but Addison's the one that becomes, I think, the real threat if you're throwing all of your resources on Jefferson.
Yeah, to me, it didn't seem like Carson and Jefferson were on the same page all the time.
Yeah.
And, there were times like it worked in London where just throw it up and let him come down with it. And this time he was throwing it maybe to the opposite shoulder or just in some areas, maybe while under pressure too, that just were not finding its target. But to me, Jordan Addison seems to be fitting the role that they need for him, which is some underneath stuff, a lot of out-raking routes to him. I don't think he's been anything but what they've expected on the field once he shows up on Sundays. So other than that, it's a question of quarterback. It's a question of if it's J.J. McCarthy when he comes back, is he going to have that same connection with Addison we saw all of training camp? How will his connection be with Jefferson, which we didn't get to see all of training camp? Tons of questions about this very potent passing attack that has obviously that big question at quarterback.
Yeah, and you mentioned it a little bit there, but whether Jefferson or Addison, Wentz, I think, just has to be better with ball placement than he was today. The one that he hits on the long throw to Addison, if he leads him better there, that's probably a walk-in touchdown.
Forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
And then I think later in that series, I asked him about some of the throws because he mentioned a couple of things that he felt like he missed. And he said there was one he dirted in the red zone with Addison. I think that was the one where Addison was leaking out on the backside and was wide open too. Probably would have had a big gain, maybe has a chance to score there. You mentioned the Jefferson ones. There were a couple of those late where if he puts it on an inside shoulder, it's probably a touchdown. So there were some of those things today that, there's a lot of reasons they didn't turn those red zone trips into touchdowns. I thought ball placement for Wentz and a couple of those at least was part of the reason why.
The one touchdown that they did score was all rushing, right?
Yeah. Jordan Mason. I know we haven't talked at all about Jordan Mason, but he was the better rusher today. Not by a ton, but he did have better yardage than Saquon Barkley. I don't remember the exact numbers. And scored on the direct snap with another replay that did clearly show that he had crossed the line there to make that a score. Special teams shout-outs. Will Reichard clears all 5 of his field goals. He still has only that one miss in London a couple weeks ago. And then Miles Price, 38-yard return that does not get called back by penalty. I feel like every Miles Price return this year, it's been, there's a holding penalty or an illegal formation. There were lots of penalties still in this game.
Did you just throw an ope in there?
Oh, I sometimes say ope.
Well, we're starting to rub off on you.
I know. There go the lights.
We'll keep talking, I think, right?
Speaking of ope.
But yes. We started to convert you into a Minnesotan. So,
yeah, it's very Midwest.
You're getting there. You're starting to pick up on some of the lexicon.
Anyway, anything to say about the special teams? Anyone?
So Will Reichard said when he hit the wire, he goes, the ball. It's been great, honestly. The special teams have looked a lot better than they did to start the season. Reichard making every kick and the Vikings fans not having to worry about their kickers. At least one thing you don't have to worry about with this 3-3 team.
Yeah, that's in Vikings history of saying you don't have to worry about the kicker. Yeah. It's every Vikings fan is probably saying
I just jinxed it.
Just jinxed it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right now he's hitting the ball pretty effectively. So
I think that'll wrap us up for this.
A round of knocks on wood here, so I don't get.
Yeah, you don't want to be the odd man out there.
For that.
That'll wrap us up on this post-game episode recapping that Vikings loss to the Eagles. As we've alluded to, they have a West Coast trip. They play the Chargers Thursday night out in LA. So short week. We will podcast at some point this week. I don't know what it is off the top of my head right now because we haven't decided. But thanks for sticking with us tonight, and we will talk to you at some point this week.